We take a look back at a movie not based on a comic book, yet a really great comic book movie, and we pay tribute to a Hollywood living legend. On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss Unbreakable. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramy Wells, and joining me today is Chad Smith.
On one end of the spectrum, you, Laramy, a DC fan. On the other end of the spectrum, me, a Marvel fan. But we have the same weakness, comic books. This was my very, very poor attempt to I don't know, that's not an impersonation. That was just me completely riffing. Okay.
Yeah, it was good work. Very good work. Very good. Well, for anybody who listened to the episode that was released earlier this week, this is a second attempt at recording this episode due to some technical issues that Chad and I had. We were unable to release this Unbreakable episode, so here we are trying again. And if you can faintly hear Chad giggling a little bit, it's because we've already had issues trying to record it this time.
Yeah, I mean, this issue is well earned, listener. Like, it's lots of work went into it.
Yeah, but as you heard from earlier this week, I'm a huge Bruce Willis fan, and so I am bound and determined to get this episode out because I want to recognize Bruce Willis by doing Unbreakable,
the greatest comic book movie that's not a comic book movie.
Yes, yeah. It's not a comic book movie, but it's not the first time we haven't done non-comic book stuff before. But yeah, like Chad said, it's a great comic book movie. So we had to do it. Yes, there are others, like I mentioned in the episode I released earlier. I mean, we could have done Sin City: A Dame to Kill For, but I didn't want to put myself through that for this tribute.
Yeah, you want a tribute to be on a high note. I mean,
yeah,
so.
And we could have watched Red. I enjoyed
Red's
Red. Red was a good one. But I just thought that Unbreakable, because it, as much as Bruce Willis kind of broke the mold with Die Hard, or not broke the mold, but he kind of created new barriers for action heroes. It kind of did the same thing in Unbreakable with what a superhero movie could be. And we'll get into that as we talk about this. All right. So Unbreakable was released November 21st of the year 2000. I cannot say that without thinking Conan O'Brien. I just, yeah, cannot.
In the year 2000.
Yeah. Of course, it was written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Shyamalan. However you pronounce it.
Sorry.
Yeah. I think I always say Shyamalan.
Yeah.
I don't know if that Y should be emphasized a little bit more, but he's pretty much riding on the tail of Sixth Sense. Here we got another movie with Bruce Willis, and hopefully it'll be good. But the thing was that it was probably the first of his movies that, even though he was famous for doing the twist ending, it was probably the first of his movies that was promoted one way and then presented another way. So, yeah. He wanted it to be promoted as a comic book movie. This is clearly a comic book movie. He opens it up with all of these facts about comics. He wanted this to be a comic book movie. However, Disney, who owns Touchstone, who released the movie, because Touchstone is pretty much the way Disney releases their, more adult movies. They wanted to say, no. Sixth Sense was a hit. Everything you release has to look like Sixth Sense. It has to look like it's a thriller.
And I mean, one of these days, Disney is really going to pull their head out and realize that comic book movies are doable. So, I mean, I'm just waiting for that day, Laramy.
Yeah. If only. If only. I can't help it. I can't help but say then there's the other end of that where the reality is Warner Brothers needs to actually figure out that. But that's a whole other topic.
But I mean, I do understand what you're getting at. It was marketed strangely, more in the kind of horror genre, almost like it was a thriller, which, to be fair, it kind of is. But I could definitely agree with what you're saying, that they were really trying to bank some money on it being a follow up to The Sixth Sense, not a comic book movie. So, which is what Shyamalan wanted to make.
Yeah, and the thing was, this is the year 2000, so we're right at the infancy of the rebirth of superhero movies. You know, Batman had come out in 89 and had really kind of lit the pilot light. And, Superman was the first, but Superman's flame had died out by the late 80s, and there wasn't anything else. I mean, Marvel had tried it with Howard the Duck, bomb. The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren, bombed. And then, of course, there's the infamous Fantastic Four movie we talk about all the time that was never actually released. And then DC comes in with Batman 89 and kind of lights the pilot light again.
Yeah.
But then it's still a slow burn. And it's not until almost 10 years later with Blade in 98 that all of a sudden we get a flame out of that pilot light.
Yeah.
And then we get X-Men just 4 months before this movie. And now we're starting to the fire's starting to burn. And even though this isn't based on a comic book movie or comic book, it is a comic book movie.
Well, I like to say that it's not based on a comic book. It's based on all comic books. I mean, this isn't some revelation. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson's character literally spends the movie referencing how what is happening is like boiled down comic book lore. So,
yeah, I love everything he does about how comics are, it's history just written in a different way.
Right.
That it's things that really happened, but they were exaggerated. It's like it's like the game of telephone. Someone told someone this happened, and then they exaggerated it when they told someone else it happened, and eventually you've got, a man who can fly.
The birth of mythology.
Yeah. This is such a great movie. It's great storytelling, and when you and again, if you're listening to this, you of course know we're spoiling the crap out of it. But I mean, the movie is 22 years old.
22 years old. Go see it. If you haven't seen it.
If you haven't seen it, just go ahead, hit pause, go down to your local Blockbuster.
No joke.
Check out the VHS of Unbreakable. Pop it into your VCR. Make sure you sit through all those wonderful, coming soon to a theater near you previews.
So, so nostalgia-wise, since you're kind of walking down that road in a very funny way, you and I had met, 2 months before this movie came out. And we didn't go see it together or anything like that. But did you see this one in the theater?
I did. I did go see this in the theaters.
In the small, in Statesboro?
Oh yeah,
or, yeah.
Yes, in the
Nice.
Yeah, in the I don't think it was in the Mugs and Movies theater,
right?
But I definitely did go see it in the theater, behind the small.
Yep.
And I actually think I went on a date to see it as well.
Nice.
Sadly, I do not remember her name. But it doesn't matter. I've got Bethany now, so that was the one that was important.
Yep.
But I saw this in theaters, and I remember when it ended, I was like, I just watched a movie that was the issue number 1 of a comic book.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is.
I just watched an origin story. Yeah. I just watched the origin story of a superhero. I mean, not. I will say, now it with this being, we're recording this in April of 2022, so Spider-Man: No Way Home just came out, and it's amazing. You finish that movie and you realize, wow, I just watched 3 movies that made up the origin of Spider-Man.
Yeah, nice.
So
I do like that. And again, like, I'm not coming up with some groundbreaking take on this or something, but M. Night Shyamalan is what he does is turn tropes on their head. I mean, that's what he's famous for, and he does it with this. But the cool thing about it is he can pull off, because I mean, a lot of people try to do that sort of thing, and often it just comes across as like parody or a poor copy, kind of thing. But what he does with this movie in particular, I think, is brilliant, because you take a group of people, comic book fans, who are very serious about their material. Like, you have to walk a thin line between making fun of them, and let's be honest, we're a kind of a touchy crowd, and doing something new, fresh, and original that gives you a new take on the thing that you love so much. So he has kind of this fine line to walk. And I think that since the explosion of, this is all just, me riffing, it's all just thoughts in my head. But I think since the explosion of the comic book movie, I don't know that you could make this movie today. Like, I feel like most filmmakers would be scared to do this, because comic book people take this stuff so seriously, and it's such a large and, let's be honest, lucrative population at this point. I don't know that he could pull this movie off now.
No, but that's what's so great about it. I mean, it's just like with The Sixth Sense. You couldn't make a movie like The Sixth Sense really today, or the Blair Witch Project, which came around around this time. I mean, that was the staple for the found footage movie. Right. Every other found footage movie that came after that, you just watched it going, yeah, I've seen this.
Right.
So that's totally the case. You put this out right at the perfect moment of where we weren't saturated with comic book movies, and I have always said that Hollywood is running out of original ideas. M. Night Shyamalan came in right here in 99 with The Sixth Sense, and all of a sudden I'm going, hey, we've got original movies again.
Right.
And that's exactly what he did with this movie. I mean,
unfortunately,
he had never seen anything like it.
Unfortunately, he ran out of those relatively quickly. But
he did. He also made the Last Airbender. So,
but that wasn't an original idea. Like, I mean, let's be fair. He tried to adapt something else. But anyways, that's the whole other story.
Yeah, we're not talking about M. Night Shyamalan. We're honoring Bruce Willis. As I stated in the episode earlier this week, for anybody who did not hear, Bruce Willis has decided to step away, pretty much retiring from acting because of his diagnosis of aphasia, I think is how you pronounce it, which is a condition that affects his language and speech. Which, of course, is very, very important for not only an actor, but for an actor like Bruce Willis.
This would be like if Tom Brady got hand cancer. Like, it's really sad to see a guy who is such a excellent communicator to be cut down mentally in his ability to communicate. It's really tragic.
Yeah, but and again, you can act. I mean, this year we're right off the cusp of the Academy Awards from a few weeks ago. We're not going to get into things that happened in the Academy Awards, but with a movie like Coda, which featured so many deaf, in some cases mute actors, you definitely can relay a lot without acting. I mean, you even go back a few more years with the movie. Yeah, excuse me. Yes, without speaking. you go back a few more years with The Artist that also won the Academy Award, which was purposely made as a silent film.
Yeah.
And there's a lot we'll talk about as we go through this episode of how much Bruce Willis was able to relay in this movie with probably doing the least amount of talking he's ever done in a movie.
I would say that there are, you can't find one, episode of TV he's done that he had less lines in than this entire film. He really, but he acts his heart out.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one that really shines for Bruce Willis, and that's, again, why we wanted to talk about it. So, I mean, we're already talking about it. Let's go ahead and get into the characters, and since we're already talking about Bruce, and since he is the main star, we'll talk about Bruce Willis, who played David Dunn. Already got that nice alliteration there that we'll talk about a little bit more, but we got David Dunn, and as David Dunn, as we just said, Bruce has always been known as this, bouncing off the wall action star. He was the comedic action star. He was the action star with the one-liners. Come on down to the coast. We'll get together, have a few laughs. Welcome to the party, pal. All of those great lines from Die Hard. He did it again in Last Boy Scout. He would do it in a lot of his other movies. Always kind of the wisecracking action star. And then you get to this, and again, a comedic actor. He started off as a comedic actor. And you get to this movie, and he is so quiet. And his character is such a introverted character. He's not that, outgoing character that he usually plays. He's quiet. He's reserved. It almost feels like he is uncomfortable talking to people.
Well, yeah, he is. I mean, his wife confronts him on it. His estranged wife confronts him on it, and even asks him, like, "Do you hold back from me and your son?" And he pauses for a silent moment and just says, "Yeah." And I think the scene that this is the most telling is when she kind of confronts him when they're thinking about getting back together. Things are going well, and there's about a 4-minute scene where she is basically monologuing in a door frame, and the back of Bruce's head is all you see of him. You see her on the other side of the door, so you're kind of like looking over his shoulder, and he literally says yes. No, he says no. I'm sorry. He replies to her no, that he never cheated on her. He wasn't with another woman while they were estranged. And so that's his sole line in that scene, and yet it's riveting. And there's just several scenes like that. I know we'll talk about one in particular toward the climax of the movie, but I don't want to ruin that yet. But yeah, he does an amazing job. There's a ton of just communicating with his eyes in this movie. Just a lot of
the scene between he and his son once it's revealed. I was about to say, I think that's, now that I'm saying it, I was like, that's the scene he's probably talking about talking.
But even before that, just a ton of vulnerability. Like you can watch this man's face become confident through this movie. Like, it's crazy. So, yeah, I mean, virtually no speaking, but he acts his pants off. So
let's talk about the character. Let's talk about David Dunn. So one of the things I like, and again, this goes to characters that Bruce Willis has played. John McClane was the first everyman action star. This is just a regular guy who is in this over-the-top situation. He's not the overly muscular Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger type action star,
or some prior, special forces operator.
Like
none of that sort of stuff,
like the Chuck Norris type stuff and whatnot. Yeah, he's not a trained martial artist or Navy SEAL. I mean, he's a cop, but he's just a street cop. Yeah, he's and so it gave a whole different look at an action star. Well, in this movie, he's playing a guy who, as we discover is a superhero, but he's a flawed human.
I don't think that's like a new revelation. There are lots of flawed superheroes introduced into comic books. I would kind of argue.
Well, no, but I'm talking about in movies though.
Yeah.
Like, how many flawed superheroes had we had in movies at this point?
Yeah, not a lot, for sure. I don't know that you'd seen anything that gave you kind of trepidation about becoming a superhero, for sure. Like, because it takes him a long time to really come around through this movie to that this kind of might be his calling. Whereas, generally speaking, up until this point, if you found out you had superpowers, it was time to kick some
montage.
Butt,
it's montage time.
Yeah.
It's let's go play around with our powers out in some field or on the rooftop or in some warehouse. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that it was written so well in the sense that it is, like I was talking about it just being a little off kilter for regular comic book stuff. I can't name another one where a middle-aged man becomes a superhero. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't call him over the hill, but like he's kind of past his prime. Like they allude to the fact that he was this like exceptional college athlete and that those days are over, and he's just kind of living in the shadow of his former athletic greatness and all this sort of stuff. And
you're talking about before this movie, right?
Right.
Before, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm referring to David Dunn in particular. Like he's living in the shadow.
I'm talking about I'm talking about a middle-aged person, becoming a superhero. That aspect, like you're talking about before this movie, because really Tony Stark is a middle-aged person who becomes
right.
A superhero.
I'm saying before this movie, you hadn't really had that. So. It was an anomaly in that sense. Like, it wasn't written about a kid who gets bit by a radioactive spider and has a coming of age story along with a coming of powers story, which is kind of the prototypical deal with comic books. This guy's got a son he's thinking about and a wife that he's trying to patch a relationship up with. These are not normal origin story comic book issues.
Yeah. But going back to what I originally said about being flawed, I'm just thinking about that opening scene on the train.
Where he takes his ring off, yeah.
And he takes his ring off to flirt with the sports agent. And so we immediately see, okay, yeah, he's not perfect. But we get those moments, and as much as it's a thing you don't typically associate with a superhero, it does show you this is a regular guy,
right?
Not that every guy does that, but it was to emphasize the fact that he's a regular guy.
Yeah, he's not the super moral, pinnacle of flawless existence or anything. No.
But because again, he clearly, as Chad said, he clearly wants the relationship between he and his wife to work out. Or else you wouldn't have that scene that once he does decide to step into the role of a superhero, he comes home and just picks his wife up, carries her upstairs.
Yeah.
Which is a great scene too that has no dialogue in it.
Yep.
But let's go ahead, just getting through the characters. Let's move on to our other main character, Elijah Price, aka Mr. Glass, played by Samuel L. Jackson. This is actually the fourth movie that Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson have been in together.
I'm trying to think. I'm not.
Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Okay.
All right. And then you've got why did my mind just go blank? It's Pulp Fiction.
Of course, yeah.
I'm not forgetting Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction, and then I count this one, Loaded Weapon 1.
Okay, I'll give it to you.
because Bruce has a cameo.
Right.
It stars Samuel L. Jackson and Emilio Estevez, but Bruce has a cameo.
That's
so
funny.
This is the fourth movie that they have been in together.
Yeah, I guess I really didn't think for some reason that Die Hard with a Vengeance came out before this, but yeah, it very much did. So.
Oh yeah. Die Hard with a Vengeance came out like early 90s.
Yeah, I don't know. It just for some reason was later to me. I know we've been throwing a lot of love Mr. Willis's way, but this is
rightfully so.
This is one of the best performances for Samuel L. Jackson, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He is known for, the swagger that he has. You think about Pulp Fiction, you think of those kind of roles. He's really vulnerable. He's literally a fragile human in this movie. Plays a character that's a fragile man, and he does a really good job of being this vulnerable character, and he also acts a lot in his face. Just the way you see him process stuff, the way he kind of shields himself against disappointment, but you can see like the sparkle of hope that he keeps hoping that David Dunn will figure out that he is a hero, and that Glass can be some sort of catalyst to get that hero into the world, those sort of things. You see all of it on his face, and he does an amazing job as well.
Yeah. What did you think of his look in this? Because it is about his swagger.
Yeah.
It's a very different look for Samuel L. Jackson.
It is. It's obviously he being M. Night Shyamalan, not Samuel L. Jackson. Sorry. It was
pronouns.
Stylistically designed to replicate a lot of comic book tropes. So you have the whole purple, being his color that signifies him throughout the movie. And what I love about that is how stylistically they even used it in varying degrees, because you really don't see much purple. It's all very muted and kind of dingy and brown. But the closer he becomes to the end and the reveal that he is the opposite of David Dunn, that he is actually the mastermind villain, that he becomes this more flashy purple the more kind of power he has. And stuff like, I love the scene where he's trying to convince Dunn of who he is when he's at the stadium, and David Dunn is just trying to do his job and all this kind of stuff, and he's not convinced by it, and he winds up going into the stadium. Well, the Glass character follows this criminal that Dunn has picked out,
pictured
kind
with
of
a gun,
via ESP, whatever you want to call it, just his extrasensory things that he has as a hero. And I love, he's in this really muted kind of bronze and a little bit purple suit, and as he crosses the road you see his coat flap open, and it's just this bright purple liner. And so they did a great job with that. And
which mimicked
the other one that stands out is his hair.
Mimicked the envelope.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
the
envelope that David opens.
Yeah,
it's that same kind of silvery envelope, and then he opens it, and it's got the bright purple on the inside.
Yeah,
so.
But which also mirrors the bright purple wrapper that his mom put the first comic book that she gave him in on the bench at the very beginning of the movie. But yeah, so the other thing that kind of immediately pops out to me is his hair. I love I love that kind of asymmetrical look they give him, just to make him very different than all of his other roles. I mean, obviously he is a bald man in the majority of his movies, I would say, but he has this large hair that is asymmetrical, and I think it's in the beginning of the movie, the first time you see him as an adult. He's talking through this panel of art that he's trying to sell this guy about all these motifs of heroes versus villains. And it's cool because he gives you some of the stuff about David Dunn too, the square jaw and the, all this kind of stuff. But he points out in that piece of art that typically villains have a disproportionate head to their body size. And I think they kind of mirror that using the hair for glass. But
Yeah, and even when you're talking about that jacket that he's wearing in that scene, that jacket is very form fitting.
yeah,
It is, so it's helping to make his body look a lot slimmer than the top part of his. Because I think, doesn't it even have a big collar? So it again gives that illusion of bigger on the top and slimmer on the bottom. Yeah, so I didn't look up who costumed this movie, but great job there with kind of the way they costumed Elijah.
So the one thing I will criticize, and I just don't understand it, what do you think about the glass cane?
That it would be, it would be very unuseful.
Yeah, I'm like, I kind of, this seems more like a liability than something to rely on, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But, definitely don't see it as something that you would want to be putting your weight on.
Yeah.
To help yourself walk.
Yeah, I mean, I get the visual, but maybe to me it was a little too on the nose. And far be it from me to criticize somebody who has made their living making beautiful movies, but I don't think the visual of the cane shattering really added anything, in my opinion. So I don't know.
But he's glass, and he shatters like glass.
Again, a little on the nose.
Yeah. But again, if that cane had fallen and it just did like a just a shatter, but held to like it was plexiglass or something, I don't guess it would have been as good of a visual.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this about Elijah. So I read that there was a professor for the University of Houston by the name of Audrey. I'm going to assume it's Colombi. Don't know how to pronounce the last name. But she said that the character of Elijah Price fits a movie trope of the magical African-American character who helps the white hero. So for anybody who doesn't realize what I'm talking about, if you think about movies like The Green Mile, you got John Coffey is the magical African-American who he's really there to help Tom Hanks's character in his journey. Legend of Bagger Vance, you got Will Smith helping out Jim Caviezel's character. You got Ghost, where Whoopi Goldberg is helping out Demi Moore.
Sister
What
Act.
Dreams?
I'm sorry, no.
What Dreams May Come, Cuba Gooding Jr. Being the guide for Robin Williams. Family Man, where Don Cheadle is helping Nicolas Cage, and they all have this magical quality about them. Whether they're a ghost, whether they have some power, or like an angel, kind of like what Cuba Gooding Jr. and I guess Don Cheadle are supposed to be in those two movies. I mean, even Morgan Freeman in just about every movie he's in. When he's literally a magical, or I don't guess I would say magical, but when he's like God in Bruce Almighty and Evan Almighty. But even my favorite movie, Shawshank Redemption, I mean, he as Red, although not magical, he's there to help Andy Dufresne in his story, and you could even argue that him as Lucius Fox to help out Batman in the Dark Knight trilogy.
The talents and gifts of a black man assisting, the white man's triumph.
The white hero,
or the white hero's triumph. Yeah, I can definitely understand that critique. And, without reading her paper and what she is alleging against it, I can't really say yay or nay whether I agree with her. But just on face value of her saying that this movie also fits that trope, I might push back a little bit. I think that this movie's smarter than that, and that's not putting other movies down. I mean, tropes are there because it is culture, and we all take some things for granted and stuff like that. And we do need to learn over time to do it better. But I kind of feel like this movie doesn't do that in a lot of ways, because really Elijah gets what he wants in the end. He's the one that engineers all of this.
Yeah.
And again, massive spoilers, but he has gone to great lengths to find his opposite in David Dunn. And it's kind of funny because while he intellectually knows that it's his opposite, he feels like he's the hero for finding and giving the world, a superhero. Is kind of the take I get on it. So at the end of the day, despite the one thing I'll really criticize about this movie, the very poor NYPD Blue ending it gets that I don't like, but Elijah wins. Like he doesn't care about going to jail. He won. He did what he came to accomplish.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's really not a lot of other characters to talk about. You do have Audrey and Joseph Dunn, played by Robin Wright Penn at the time, and Spencer Treat Clark, respectively. Anything particular you want to bring up about either of those two characters or the actors' performances?
Well, total side note, at the beginning credits, I saw Robin Wright Penn, and I went, oh yeah, she was married to Sean Penn for a little while. Who remembered that? But anyways, both of those characters, while relatively small roles, are super critical to David Dunn's eventual
development,
realization of his superpowers, and especially without. And it's really interestingly written because they're kind of polar opposites, his son and his wife, because his wife is the reason he doesn't fulfill his destiny earlier in life, because she doesn't want him to have a violent existence like a football player, and you would kind of superheroing is probably a little more violent arguably than that even. And then but his son is the one that like believes from the word go. Like he is into this. He very much believes that his dad is a hero and can accomplish these things, and is willing to shoot him apparently to prove it. But so both of them are on these kind of, they both love him but are fighting for his soul in different ways, and it makes for some interesting tension. And both of them are fantastic actors. I mean, Robin Wright, obviously known as a very talented actress, and but she does
and
amazing
Buttercup
work
from
in
Princess
this.
Bride.
Yeah, and the kid, man, that kid. There are a couple of times where there's just a conversation between father and son, and there aren't any words. And we might as well go ahead and talk about it. But the climactic scene when after David Dunn has fought, what do we call him? The Man in Orange? I mean, I don't
think he was given a name,
but
he's just the man. Yeah, the Orange Man. I don't know what you want to
say. And you have, I don't know, what would you say? Probably about a 90-second scene where all it is the two of them at the table, and the news is playing in the background, and Bruce pushes the paper across the table, and the son sees the article about the hooded man who saves family, and Bruce just slowly pulls his finger up to his lips to tell him not to, giving him the shush, don't say anything motion. And man, the two of them just tight shots from one face to the other, and it's brilliant.
It's great. And that guy, he's still working, but as a child actor, there was because he was Jeff Bridges' son in Arlington Road. Do you remember that movie?
No.
Yeah, Arlington Road was the one where Tim Robbins and Jeff Bridges, and he suspects Jeff Bridges suspects that his neighbor is a terrorist. I
really vaguely remember that, but no.
Yeah, that just popped into my head. And then of course he also played wasn't he Joaquin Phoenix's son in Gladiator?
Oh yeah. And he's great at that. The tiny bit of time you get to see him, but he's not Joaquin Phoenix's son, he's the sister's son.
Oh, sister's
but anyways,
son. Okay, yeah.
Neither here nor there, but yeah.
Yeah.
He's Commodus's nephew.
Yeah. And of course he came back into a comic book movie or I say movie, it was television show. You know, he played Von Strucker in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
So, but
Nice.
but yeah, no, he gives a great performance. That scene is probably, if I were to pick a favorite scene, that would probably be one of my favorites.
It's
just the
pretty awesome, yeah.
Yeah, the moment between father and son. I mean, I even like his performance when David is lifting the weights.
Yeah.
And he's just every time you see him,
slowly backing
further back
up till he's up the stairs part of the way, the last one. Yeah. And his like questionless belief is cool. Like you believe him as a son of that age, just like remembering when you thought your dad, you know, could do anything kind of stuff. And then he kind of realizes my dad can do anything.
Pretty much can,
you know, so it's
the
really
scene,
cool.
Yeah, again, another great scene. The scene where he's playing football with all the kids and the one football player, and he runs up and tells his dad, he goes, I told all of them that, you know, you could beat any of them. And, you know, he said, why don't you come and play? And of course, David chooses not to, but then he immediately said, I'm going to go home and work out. He goes, okay, guys, I got to go with my dad. You know, I mean, he's just, it's a great, they're telling a great story out of this.
And,
you know,
bringing up that scene, I hope I'm not changing gears too much, but bringing up that scene is another one of those Shyamalan turning the tropes on its head moments, because you're expecting, again, the montage thing you were talking about earlier. Like, you know, he should, it's a perfect setup. Here's this kid from Penn State who you learned in the opening scenes is a, you know, All-American and potential NFL player and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And so it's set up for Dunn to go down there and miraculously beat this kid in his prime who's NFL talent, you know, and everything. And he doesn't. He just decides to go home and work out instead. And it's just there's a series of those events where you're expecting him to do the superhero thing, and he doesn't. He just passes it on because he doesn't believe yet.
Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes and VCRs and video rental stores? Does the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? If you want to go back to school, back to the future, or even back to the beach, then the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast is for you. I'm Tim Williams, the creator and host, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest co-host as we revisit a different 80s flick to discuss our first-time watch memories, iconic scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories along the way. New episodes drop every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast.
all right, well, there's not really a lot to say in terms of moving panels because, again, this is not based on a comic book. But as Chad said, it's based off of every comic book. So let's talk about how this movie was filmed. I did make note of the cinematographer, Eduardo Serra, who did a beautiful job of making this movie look like a comic book.
Yeah.
You know, he framed, almost every shot is framed to where there is you're looking at the shot through either like a window or a doorway, or, you know, there's something about the shot. Yeah, there's something about the shot where you know exactly where to look on that screen.
Right.
You know, he draws your eye, and I know that's the job of a cinematographer, but he does it in the way that a comic book does,
right,
with like the bubbles. You know exactly what order to read the bubbles in. You know exactly what order to go from one panel to the other.
Right.
You know, that is an art. And he ties in film cinematography and comic book panel art. He ties them in together.
Right.
And
Part of it is through very little, very sparse camera movement. Almost all the shots are a still camera that has framed a shot. And in that shot, there are often frames like you're talking about, like, Bruce standing in a doorway. I mentioned one earlier where you're looking over Bruce's shoulder. You see a lot of that in comic books when one character is talking to the other. You see the over the shoulder kind of perspective, and you get that again at the end when you kind of, from David Dunn's perspective, are seeing Elijah explain that he's the villain and he did it all to bring Bruce to the world, to bring David Dunn to the world. So I agree. It's brilliantly shot to mimic moving panels. That's an interesting. But so
hey, that's a great name. But shots like you have where David Dunn and Elijah are talking at the stadium, and they're standing in the the little tunnel, and you're thinking, regular movie would go right up on them and have a 2-shot of the two of them talking, but he keeps the camera back, so they're not even very brightly lit. The
almost
the walls
silhouetted.
to the the walls to the side are very dark, and so it looks like you're looking into a panel of a comic. Mm-hmm. Even going into some of the connection stuff, everything with Mr. Glass, with Elijah, is connected in some way to Glass. Not only his cane, but when we're first entered the very beginning of the movie, we're introduced to that character
in a mirror.
In a reflection in a mirror, which you don't even realize it's a reflection.
It's so brilliantly done. Yeah.
Until a few moments into the scene. Like you talked about the camera movement. Yeah. The camera moves just a little bit tiny for you to all of a sudden to realize we're looking in a reflection.
Well, isn't it when the doctor looks up into the mirror to look at the person behind him, and you get just this tiny tilt, and the doc looks up, and you're like, oh, okay, that was cool.
Yeah,
and
I think you get to see the edge. Yeah, you get to see the edge of the mirror right at that same moment, and realizing, and then we come later to back to Elijah is now a little boy. Mm-hmm. First time you see him, you're seeing him through the reflection of the TV.
In the TV, yeah, an old, like convex TV, so it's this distorted image. It's really cool.
Yeah, and then he looks at the kids playing in the playground, and it's shot through the window. Mm-hmm. You see him looking through the window down at the kids. Sees the package that his mom's put on the shelf and all that. When David finds the invitation, you're seeing it through the windshield. Mm-hmm. And again, these great framed shots, not only having that connection to the character through that, but also, again, that great cinematography.
Yeah, even I would argue that one of the most comic book panel-like shots is when Elijah goes down to the park and gets that first comic book. I can see the art where it's filmed through the park bench. The president is sitting on the park bench. You just see from a waist down this kid walking to the park bench, turn around, sit down, put his hand on that to me looks like comic book art. Like I can see that panel in a comic book. So brilliantly done.
Well, and then continuing on that, the comic book connections, we already talked about the purple with Glass, but there's color associated with everybody. I mean, David has the green,
green and rust, I think is his is his color palette. And then every quote unquote villain that his superpower shows him is connected to a specific color.
Yeah, you got you mentioned earlier the guy with the gun who's wearing, it's tan, it's like a tan camouflage, but they I don't know if they're using some sort of post stuff, but they make that color look different than anything else in the scene. Then when David's doing it in the bus station, or train station, wherever it was that he was. You've got the abusive mother who's in this bright pink suit or whatever she's wearing.
Mm-hmm.
You got the drug dealer played by M. Night Shyamalan who's wearing the blue jacket.
Yeah, that was back at the stadium, but yeah.
Yeah, those were in the stadium.
Yeah.
Then you had the thief, the woman who steals the jewelry. She's in a red dress. You had the guy who commits the hate crime, throws the stuff at the people from the car. He's in yellow.
The the frat boy rapist. That's maybe the most disturbing one, but
yes, it very much is. And let me remind everybody, I took a date to see this movie. And
then of course the man in orange.
Yeah.
Is obviously very stylized.
Yeah. Really quick little trivia, and the man in orange was supposed to be the Horde.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be the James McAvoy character that would then show up in Split, which again, spoiler if you didn't know, Split is technically a sequel to this movie.
Which that movie's only 17 years old, so go watch it.
Yeah. But M. Night decided to cut that out because he wanted the movie to focus on David and Elijah.
Right.
That they were the comic book quote unquote characters. He didn't want to bring in this other superpowered villain.
Well, and he even explains it with the mom at the end of the movie. David Dunn's stand there talking to Elijah's mom in not a comic shop, but in his art gallery, and she's explaining that there's the drone villain that's just the henchman, and then there's the mastermind villain, and she's telling you what has happened, that you've seen the strong arm villain, but you haven't been introduced yet, to who to
the man pulling the strings.
Yeah. But anyways, another one though, I want to go back just a second talking about the stylized stuff and it being so comic book. The other shot that to me is like straight from a comic book, I can see it as a panel, is David Dunn when he finally accepts that he's the hero and stands in that train station, and you see from behind as he starts to spread his hands out to his sides. He's wearing the poncho. He's just come from seeing the train wreck that he was in. He's in the he breaks into the NTSB building and he's seeing the wreck, and he's starting to buy into it, and he goes and he stands in the train station and he spreads his hands out to his side. That to me is straight comic book panel and is very cool.
Well, and then they even give him his hero moment. And again, we're jumping to the end here, but when the kids save him out of the pool.
Yeah.
And he has that where he just stands up.
Yeah.
And you're like, he's a superhero now. It's all he did was stand up, but yet that's his superhero moment.
I know. It's so cool. Which, let's dissect that scene for a second. For one of my other very, very minor criticisms of this movie, the fact that water is the shared weakness.
Yeah, because when do we ever know that Elijah has a problem with water?
Yeah, I don't remember that being part of his thing. So, I mean,
unless he slips on it, then
I don't know.
I mean, yeah, if he slips on some water, that would be a problem for him.
But water being...
But he specifically says that you swallow it too fast.
Right. And he falls in a pool and doesn't swallow water too fast. So again, very, very minor criticism of the movie making. But water being your Achilles heel or not, fall into a pool like plastic cover and get wrapped up by that had me cringing. And I love I'm a big time swimmer. I love to swim, and I was like, that's creepy no matter what.
because you see him look to every side and you just see those sandbags
falling into
sliding
the pool,
and then falling into the pool, and I'm like, I don't care. Water doesn't have to be Water does not have to be your weakness. If you're about to get wrapped up in a tarp,
Yeah,
underwater,
you can't swim in a tarp, dude. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
Good. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, the kid's saving him. To me, that's very, Spider-Man when he gets carried over the train passengers. It's that moment. Like the city takes care of the hero so that the hero can in turn save them, kind of thing. So, very cool scene.
Yeah, great moment. And we got all the other comic book connections. I mentioned earlier the alliteration with the name David Dunn, goes right off with comic book characters like Peter Parker, Reed Richards, Bruce Banner, Matt Murdock. I'll even throw in Clark Kent, even though it's a different letters, it's still same sound. Clark Kent.
So taking Clark Kent out of the equation, should they have given Stan Lee a writer's credit on this movie?
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a character? Again, Clark Kent is the same sound, but of course you got Lois Lane, Lex Luthor, all of those. But is there another superhero that was not created or partially created by Stan Lee?
Jack Kirby, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if there is.
It very much was a Stan Lee calling card for a long time. So.
Then you also have Elijah's comic, the Active Comics, the one he gets from his mom, which is made to look exactly like Action Comics.
Yeah.
It's the same font and layout of Action Comics. You have the stuff that, like Elijah says at the end, it's just like in the comics where the superhero and the villain start out as friends. And of course, we've seen that so much. Victor Von Doom and Reed Richards. We've seen that in their origins. Of course, there's been versions of where Lex and Clark Kent were friends before they became enemies, and so we've seen a lot of that. So you had that whole aspect. And I will even throw in. We've talked about it a couple of times already. The scene where Joseph pulls the gun on David. That is another kind of a comic book. Trope of the friend needing to prove that their friend or their family member or whatnot is a superhero.
Right. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
It's not in a comic book, but in the director's cut, the Donner cut of Superman 2, that's what Lois does to Clark. When she starts to suspect that Clark is Superman, she pulls a gun. Now, in the theatrical version, he trips and falls and puts his hand into a fire. Very stupid, but again, there's the where she figures it out and she pulls the gun on him, and of course, we've had several other aspects of that where the superhero has to find a way out so that they don't reveal themselves, which is what they do in this scene. Yeah, he has to find a way out because, like we talked about with like the montage scene. They clearly could have had him pull the trigger, and now we've got a moment where the bullet, bounced off of him, or the bullet, just falls to the ground, kind of sticks to him for a minute and then falls to the ground.
Right.
But this is not that type of superhero movie.
Right.
And so they handle it beautifully where Bruce, again, just gives a great performance and, turns it on its head and goes, go ahead and shoot me. If you shoot me, I'm gone. I leave.
Yeah.
He's pretty much saying you're either going to shoot me and I'm going to die, or you're going to shoot me and I'm going to pack my bags and I'm going to move.
Right.
Which they had already alluded to that he was thinking about moving to New York earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
So,
so in the ways that they turn comic books on its head, like you were just talking about, the other big one to me is kind of this like symmetry ending with him, as far as at the beginning of the movie, he pulls his ring off and you see this flawed guy who's, thinking about maybe, being unfaithful to his, albeit estranged wife and that sort of thing. So you get this like, kind of moment at the beginning of the movie. But a really subtle one is the way in which he honors his wife, her desire for him not to be a violent man and to live that. So even when he takes down the man in orange, granted, it is a fight. It is a physical struggle, but he does it in arguably the least violent way you could possibly do it. He just goes in, headlocks that dude, and then bull rides him to the ground. Like, he's just got him in a headlock, and the guy's thrashing around, breaking stuff, and throwing,
throws him into the wall. Yeah.
But he just doesn't let go of the headlock and chokes him out. And that, to me, is this really kind of subtle other side of him as a moral person. Like, he's still thinking about, what his wife wants him to be. Yeah. To me, I think that's what I read into that scene, and I think it's really cool.
Yeah, because he doesn't go in immediately going straight for the bad guy. I mean, when he enters that house, he goes straight looking for the family.
Right.
He finds the kids. He gets the kids out of there. He finds the wife, but then he sees the man in orange.
Yeah.
Or
no, the man in orange.
Kind of vice versa. Yeah, the man in orange sees him.
Pushes him out the window.
Yeah. And then, which talk about kind of moving panel type thing.
Yeah.
The flipping of the camera.
Yeah.
I can see that as like 4 different panels going down a page.
And the lead up to it, you're seeing the close up of Bruce's face looking out the window, and the man in orange coming up behind him. Same thing. That's a panel. But
it appears with the flow of the curtain. He just all of a sudden appears there. But then the heartbreak of after he chokes out the man in orange and he goes to free the mom.
Yeah,
and you realize that the mom, she's already dead.
Yeah.
But
to go back to the point, like, he's non-violent in as much as one could be, and you also see that with his conversations with Elijah, and Elijah talking about his choice of profession, and he's using terms like guardian and when did you start needing to protect people and all this kind of stuff. And so he's not the vigilante, he's by no means Batman going around busting skulls to stop crime kind of thing. Like, he's motivated to protect people, and which I think plays really well into the writing, in the sense that he's making the argument, the Glass character in particular is making the argument that comic books are this like primal man, and the comic is what's left of the myth that we have told about ourselves, and that part of that is we believe that there are heroes, there are guardians, people who have this primal need to protect others. And so it's just really cool. It's very, very well written and nicely tied up in that sense to me.
Going back, and we can kind of hit any of our favorite scenes that we haven't already mentioned. But I remembered one. Again, kind of pull back the curtain a little bit. Again, as I said, Chad and I had already recorded this episode, and then we had a technical issue where the recording had an error in it. But I just remembered about a scene that we talked about that hasn't come up in our natural conversation here, but I do want to bring it up. The scene where David is talking to the doctor in the hospital at the beginning, after he has recovered from, or not recovered because there's nothing wrong with him.
Wasn't hurt, yeah.
Yeah. But when he is sat up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. Yeah, you think that, or I did anyways, you have this interaction with the little girl while they're on the train. And so the doctor's explaining that there have been only 2 survivors of the accident. And you kind of, or I did anyways, again, the viewer is, I feel, led to believe that maybe it's this little girl, like maybe he saved her during the crash, because you kind of get the sense that he's looking for her right before everything goes down. But
because that goes into that framing again.
Oh, man.
Because when you see her, the whole scene between him and the flirting with the agent is done through between the middle of the seats. Yeah. It's from her perspective. And then, like you said, right before the train crashes, when everybody's all of a sudden realized something's wrong, he looks back and she's gone.
Yeah.
Like, you don't see her.
But fast forward to being with the Doctor, and it's perfectly shot. David Dunn is in a room. How do you word that? I'm trying to. You're standing in a room.
The camera is in a different room. Yeah,
and you're looking through a doorway to David Dunn on a examination table, and the Doctor is just a little bit out behind the door frame talking to him. And in the frame, you just see something that's kind of out of focus, and you begin to realize that it's a sheet. Then you start to realize that it's a sheet over a person, and then you see this
torso
bloom
of a person.
blood that is just growing at a frightening rate. And the Doctor's explaining that, yes, while he's one of only 2 people who have lived, that's not even going to be the case for much longer because the other person is dying directly in front of you. And it's a terrifyingly good shot scene. So
and so that's why I had to bring that one back up since it didn't fall into our natural conversation this time around. I remembered that conversation from the first time we recorded, and I was like, I can't do this episode without talking about that scene again.
The other thing that you brought up that I kind of wanted to hit again, just because I thought it was a brilliant thing when you mentioned it, was the use.
If I brought it up, of course it was a brilliant thing.
Names, nice. But the use of biblical names.
Oh yeah, Elijah, David.
All 3 male characters, that you meet are all biblical names. You have Joseph, David, and Elijah. And what is your perceived meaning there?
So the way I was looking at it was I started off with just the Elijah connection, and how in this movie, even though he's a villain, even though his motives are evil, he is in essence the prophet for the coming savior. Which has the connection with Elijah there, and so. I don't know if M. Night Shyamalan had that intention. Of course, you can kind of go with David and being the king, and such a favored king, and or even going all the way to David and Goliath. Him being just the small, like unassuming
hero
person, who ends up being the hero.
Well, and Joseph's a favored son. All that sort of stuff. Yeah, you can read a lot into that. I kind of took it a little bit different way in the sense that I think he's just using things out of religion in myth building. I think that's a shortcut to telling you're in a myth building, kind of arena by using culturally known religiosity, whatever you want to call it. I kind of want. I know we're just saying all of this on the fly, so I almost want to pick on what you said just a minute ago, though, about Elijah, his motives being evil. Are his motives evil? His actions.
Yeah.
His actions are
his
evil.
Actions are evil,
like
but his motive is to bring a superhero. Yeah,
he murders a ton of people. Actions are evil, but is his motives evil?
Yeah, because his motive is to bring a superhero into the world, to bring a guardian, a protector into the world. I
mean, it's kind of crazy, but I think M. Night Shyamalan made a fantastically relatable villain in that. Like, most of us would sit here and say, we wouldn't murder 300 people to find, the hero that's going to save a ton of people, but you can still, you get the logic. It's one of those Thanos moments where you're like, I see where he's coming from, but.
Which again, I've said this before several times. It makes a good villain when you kind of empathize or sympathize with the villain. It makes for a good villain. So let's talk about, we've kind of hit it here and there, but let's kind of put it in a nice little bow. With this movie being right at the beginning and right as the flame is getting started, 8 years later, we would get the birth of the MCU with Iron Man. What what do you think? How do you think this movie impacted the superhero movies that we would get later?
So, I think that this was the first movie that didn't ask, how do we take a comic book and make it real world? It really flips that paradigm upside down, in my opinion. And they took, how do you move the real world into a comic book? And I think you kind of see this successfully.
That's a good way to put that.
Mimicked later on. No, I wouldn't say the Dark Knight trilogy. I think that still falls into that first camp. How do we make, comic books real world?
I'll agree with you on that when it started. I think Batman Begins was definitely, let's put a comic book into the real world. But I think Dark Knight
kind of blurs
did a
that
better
line a
job.
little more.
Did a better
I
job.
agree with you. But I think the MCU in particular, I kind of think subconsciously that might be part of the reason why Iron Man worked so well, because that is a believable, this is happening in the regular real world kind of scenario. And so not a comic book being shoehorned into the real world kind of situation. But the grittiness definitely left its mark on comic book movies for quite some time. The fact that his superhero uniform is a poncho and a security vest, that he's wearing in the pouring rain in front of a chain link fence. Like, these aren't your flashy,
which he maintains because he's wearing the same thing in Glass. When we see the sequels, he maintains that.
Yeah. So it for sure left its mark on comic book movies, and I think it also was the first time that that the reason for superheroes was also kind of normalized, in a way. Like, I like how Glass's character really makes you believe that this isn't that far-fetched, that we have kind of taken this thing that's been with us throughout history, and we've overemphasized it and flashed it up and turned it into comic books, but that there's a core of truth in it as well. Because I think that as comic book fans, we all deep down sort of believe that. Like, even if it's just a moral sense of it being a real story, there is that. So I think it really broke comic books down to its essence, and allowed other movies to do the same.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. I have said, when people ask me about my love for Superman, I don't talk so much about his powers. I talk about what he represents. Yeah. The person who always wants to help everybody, the person who sees the best in humanity. Right. And it was a great way to put that. So I totally agree with that. And everything you said. I mean, this movie stripped everything down. Mm-hmm. As dark and gritty as Batman 89 was, it was still a comic bookish world. Right. I mean, even the sets, the way Tim Burton did the city, that you wouldn't see that in the real world. And even when I talked about Batman Begins, the bullet train going through the middle.
There aren't giant industrial Art Deco plants full of vats of acid in your town, Laramy? What are you talking about?
No, there's not. Yeah. Yeah. Or giant Atlas looking statues that are holding up parts of buildings and bridges
and 100 story tall cathedrals, and
yeah. So I mean, because even other even other comic book movies that were coming out around this time. I mean, Blade kind of felt a little real worldish, but then it had to have that scene at the end where they're in this, crypt looking ancient tomb, and that brought it back into the comic book world.
But that's also a vampire movie. I kind of feel like Blade cheated a little bit. Like, just being honest, it was like, what comic book could we take and make a movie and people wouldn't necessarily know about it? Like, that was Blade. I think the better example is
people
X-Men.
forget that was Iron Man too. I mean, Iron Man. Yeah, people tend to forget now that it's been it
wasn't super
however
well
many
known, as a comic
Iron
book.
Man was not a top tier character in Marvel.
No, I
so
agree. Yeah. But I think the better example is X-Men, because they had to find their own way. It was pre Unbreakable. They had to find their own way to kind of, how much do we lean into this being a comic book movie, like visually, the whole 9 yards. And you can definitely see it's different. And I think I would argue that you can see it change post Unbreakable. I think you see it become a little more, even in the X-Men franchise, as the movies, in my opinion, didn't get better, but the aesthetic, I think, did. I think in the first movie, you see a little more of like the colorful X-Men typical panels, and it looks a little more like, the X-Men cartoon you had watched when you were a kid, and they even reference that and make fun of it a little bit in that they're not going to wear those
blue and yellow
spandex.
Yeah.
But they still have to kind of play with that line, and then Unbreakable was like, you don't need to play with it at all. You could strip all that away, and you could still make a superhero movie. So, but anyways.
Yeah. All right, let's just get into it. I mean, you all know where we're headed. Bag it, stack it, or trade it. Go ahead, Chad. How would you treat Unbreakable if it was, in fact, a comic book?
I mean, it's an issue number 1 mint. It is for sure going in a bag. So, but I mean, it's a great origin story. It's top 3 comic book movies in my opinion. It's fantastic.
Oh, I agree. This isn't just a bag it. This is a send it off to be graded, sealed.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it's one of the best origin stories that they have ever told in a movie. And you said top 3 in 2011. Now, again, 2011. So this is MCU has started.
Yeah.
Time Magazine ranked Unbreakable as the 4th best superhero movie of all time.
I believe it.
4th best. I know that I think The Incredibles was ranked number 1 on that list.
Nice. You mean the best Fantastic Four movie ever made? Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. And then The Dark Knight and Spider-Man 2 were the other 2 that topped it, which I'm not going to disagree with that. By the way, another movie on that list is another movie you and I have discussed. The Rocketeer was on their list.
Oh, nice.
Of the top 10 greatest superhero movies of all time. Again, this was back in 2011, so it's a little outdated of a ranking or a best of list. But
I mean, maybe we're kind of a little biased at this point because we've been just heaping praise on this movie for an hour. But I would argue that Unbreakable's probably held up better than maybe 2 of the 3 that were ahead of it in that listing. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with you. I could see it definitely. It's held up better than. I still think Spider-Man 2 is the best of that trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see Unbreakable kind of holds up better than it does now.
Yeah.
But because Unbreakable, it's like we've kind of talked about throughout this hour, it's a superhero movie that looks more on the inside than it does on the outside. It looks at what does a person go through when they've come to this realization that they have powers. It humanizes a comic book character.
Yeah.
And again, I think that M. Night Shyamalan and all those involved in making this movie look and feel the way it does, it showed, hey, look, this is what you can do with this genre. These are the stories you can tell.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we saw that when Iron Man then showed up in 2008 when Nolan did Batman, there was a lot more about Bruce Wayne and what Bruce Wayne was going through. There was a lot more about Tony Stark and what Tony Stark was experiencing. And we get to see more and more of that. But I totally agree. This has been a great conversation, and I hope it is a fitting way to honor Bruce Willis. Of course, he is still with us. This isn't we're not memorializing Bruce Willis, but we definitely want to give him our honor, and just know that we have appreciated his work. Die Hard is probably my number 2 movie. No offense, Shawshank Redemption is always gonna be number 1 for me. But Die Hard is probably my number 2 movie. Unbreakable is one of my favorites that we're talking about, and there's so many more. I'm a huge Bruce Willis fan, as Chad has known long before my love for comic book movies.
Yeah.
I was always after Bruce Willis movies. Good, bad, I didn't care.
Asking the rest of us, hey, do you guys want to watch Bruno the Kid? Like,
yeah,
I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever seen Sunset? Let's watch Sunset.
Let's watch Hudson Hawk again. No, I'm good, Laramy.
Look, that's one of my guilty pleasures. I actually like Hudson Hawk.
Just giving you a hard time.
No, I understand. But yeah, so again, from me again, I know I stated all of my thoughts and all that in the previous episode, but this is a great movie to see a great performer like Bruce Willis, and I definitely recommend that if you have not seen Unbreakable, and I know we've spoiled a lot of it, but it's still worth the watch.
Yeah.
Again, there's very little. If you really go back and listen, there's very little that Chad and we're nitpicking if we talk about anything negative.
Yeah.
We're nitpicking. We alluded to it earlier. We're not a big fan of the title card at the end.
Man.
Elijah Glass served time in a mental facility, and
you're expecting bong bong, like
yeah.
Yeah, not a fan of that. But other than that, so I am going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Bruce Willis performance. Where does this rank all-time Bruce Willis performances?
Oh, yeah. Top 3, off the cuff. And again, as I mentioned, he's such a diverse performer.
Yeah. That
comparing his performance here with comparing it to Moonlighting. Yeah. Playing David Addison in Moonlighting. Comparing it to John McClane. He's so. But again,
that's you're looking what we do as fans, though. You make lists. Where does he line up? I don't know.
But as acting performances, this is definitely top 3.
Yeah.
I would probably have to think a little bit more to pinpoint it more so, but I would definitely put this in top 3.
I think pure acting, it's 1 or 2.
Yeah, very well could be.
Whew, it's great.
Yeah, it's a great performance. All right, well, thanks, Chad, for joining me. I look forward to our conversations always, and we try to keep them short as best we can. Yeah, we try. I'm not saying we're successful, but we try.
Oh, man.
I will apologize to everyone listening. The original recording for this was only like an hour and 8 minutes. So you do get a little bit longer one on the take 2 of this episode. But thanks everybody. If you did hold on to listen to this one, we're gonna immediately come back on Monday with the one shot where I finish up my review and walkthrough of the Mandrake the Magician movie serials from 1939, and we finally get to find out what happens at the end. But today, again, thank you, Chad. Thank you, Bruce Willis, for an amazing career that we can look back on fondly and enjoy. And we wish you the best with whatever life has in store for you. But anything you want to say, Chad?
No, just thanks for letting me, say thanks to one of your movie icon heroes. So it's been a blast.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody, for Moving Panels. I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
What seems to be the problem, pal?
There's just so much pain in the world, so many issues. I don't think I can bear it.
Hell, friendo, it sounds like you could use a dose of pop culture roulette.
Pop culture roulette? What's that? Some sort of pop culture themed podcast or something?
That's right, sonny boy. When hope seems far, dive into some PCR.
But I already get my entertainment news from Variety.
Huh, that's pretty good. If you're a chucklehead, PCR gives you news you need, condensed, unfiltered, and raw, from three nerds who know a little something about something.
Wow, okay, sign me up.
That's the spirit. Pop Culture Roulette. New episodes every Monday, available on all major podcast directories.